The wind whispered across the empty plains of Zaaren Steppe, where sun-bleached stone walls stood half-buried in the dust. Their corners were too precise to be the work of erosion, and their symmetry too deliberate to be chance. Long corridors stretched like the ribs of fossilized beasts, and doorways led nowhere but the echo of time itself. Travel back in time with us. Subscribe now for amazing history stories every week. These ruins were the last remains of the Naraa, a nomadic people who once wandered the grasslands thousands of years ago, and who, for a brief, strange moment, stopped wandering to build homes so perfect that not even the storms could destroy them. And then, inexplicably, they left. The builders who wouldn't stay. The Naraa had always moved with the seasons. They followed the migration of herds and the rhythm of rainfall, carrying everything they owned on the backs of pale-furred beasts called dray. Their lives were songs of motion, never settling, never belonging to the earth beneath their feet. But then came the year of silent skies, a year when no rains fell, no herds returned, and no birds passed overhead. The grass died, and with it, the certainty of movement. For the first time, the Naraa could not follow the world, because the world had stopped moving. It was then that their leader, a woman named Tala, declared a new path. "If the earth no longer shifts for us," she said, "then we shall build where it stands." The elders protested. The spirits, they claimed, punished those who rooted themselves. But Tala silenced them with a single truth. Wander means nothing if there is nowhere left to go. So the Naraa, for the first time in memory, began to build. The homes of silence. They chose a valley shielded from the wind and dug into the cliff sides. Their architects, who had once designed collapsible tents of bone and hide, now carved into stone. They shaped rooms that stayed cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Their engineers, guided by nothing but instinct and the stars, crafted aqueducts from mountain streams and traps for dew. What they built was not crude or temporary. It was astonishingly perfect. The walls aligned with the solstices. The air moved through vents that made each chamber breathe like a living thing. Murals covered the interiors, painted in ochre and soot, telling the story of the Naraa's journey across centuries. And when it was done, the valley glowed at dusk with hundreds of fires burning inside these stone sanctuaries. The Naraa had made homes that could outlive the wind. For a while, they thrived. Crops grew in terraces carved along the cliffs, and laughter echoed in the canyons. They no longer chased herds. Their herds grew fat within pens. Children who had never seen migration learned to walk on the same soil. Tala believed they had conquered the curse of movement, but something changed. The restlessness returns. At first, it was small things. People would wake in the night, swearing they heard the call of the wind outside, the same one that had once guided them. Their animals grew uneasy, kicking at their pens. The air, though still, began to feel heavy, as though the valley itself resented being tamed. A year after settling, hunters who ventured beyond the valley never returned. Tracks disappeared into the grass as if erased. The oldest among them whispered that the steppe spirits were reclaiming their own. One morning, Tala woke to find the sky filled again, not with birds, but with a dark cloud of dust rising on the horizon. It wasn't storm or herd. It was movement. The world was moving again. And that night, as the fires flickered low, the Naraa gathered in the central hall. Silence hung thick as Tala spoke. "We built these homes to survive the stillness," she said. "But now the earth calls us again. To stay would be to disobey what we are." Some wept at her words. Others felt only relief, as though a sickness had lifted. By dawn, they began to dismantle what they could carry. But strangely, they left the homes themselves untouched, swept clean, doors closed, fires extinguished neatly. The murals on the walls were left unfinished, as if paused mid-story. And so they left. Centuries later, the scholar and the wind, thousands of years passed. The Naraa vanished into legend, half myth, half ghost of memory. Their valley was forgotten until a wandering scholar named Taran Joe found it by accident. Taran was mapping old trade routes when his compass needle began to spin. The wind pushed him toward a narrow canyon, where he stumbled upon the ruins of the Naraa. He spent months there, documenting every perfect angle, every untouched wall. The homes were pristine, no signs of collapse or fire. It was as if the people had just stepped out and never returned. But there was one mystery that plagued him. Why leave perfection? One night, while sleeping in one of the old dwellings, Taryn was awakened by a low hum. It wasn't the wind. It came from within the stone, a deep vibration like the earth sighing. He pressed his ear against the wall and felt it pulse faintly, as though it still remembered the heartbeat of its builders. Then he heard a whisper, not words, but something older, something like motion itself. The next morning, he packed up his tools and left without taking a single artifact. His journal's last entry read, "The Naraa built homes that breathe, but their hearts were meant for wandering. The stones held their bodies, but the wind held their souls. When the world began to move again, they followed the pulse of life and left their perfection behind." The truth in the dust. Historians today still debate Taryn Joe's discovery. Some claim seismic tremors forced the Naraa to leave. Others believe disease or invasion drove them out. But among the nomadic tribes that still cross the steppes, a different story endures. They say the Naraa built those homes not as a rebellion against their nature, but as a lesson to future wanderers, to remind them that stillness is not the same as peace, that even perfect walls can become prisons if the wind calls your name. And so, whenever the traveling herders pitch their tents, they leave a single stone unplaced at the corner, a gap for the wind to pass through, a whisper of memory, a promise never to be trapped again. The wind's answer. Sometimes, when storms sweep across the Zaaren Steppe, the air rushes through the empty ruins of a Naraa valley. The sound it makes is almost human, like a sigh or perhaps a song. To those who listen closely, the wind carries an answer to the question that time forgot.